The morning he finally went back to his daughter's grave, the sky over Los Angeles looked washed out and tired, as if it had cried itself empty before he arrived. Ethan Hale stood at the edge of the trimmed grass, expensive leather shoes darkening in the damp. His blonde hair, usually perfect for boardrooms and magazine covers, clung to his forehead in the thin mist. He hadn't bothered with an umbrella. In one hand he held a slim leather folder, contracts, numbers, something safe to focus on. In the other, nothing at all. Mia's name was carved into smooth granite, the dates below it still refusing to make sense. 16 years. That was all she got. He had built a national chain of family restaurants in less time than that. He had come here, he told himself, to prove that he could. To show Brooke he wasn't afraid. To show Lauren, wherever she was this morning, that he could face the stone without falling apart. But when his gaze slid down the gravestone, the practiced numbness he had worn for months cracked. Something new sat on the narrow ledge at the base of the stone. A small ceramic bird, white once, now chipped along one wing, perched beside a folded envelope tucked neatly underneath. The bird was familiar. He remembered Mia laughing as she held it up in a thrift store years ago, saying it was too ugly to leave behind. The envelope was worse. The paper had softened from the damp, but the ink was clear, dark, deliberate. Ethan. His own name, written in Mia's looping teenage handwriting. For a moment, all he could do was stare. His throat closed. The world around him, the distant hum of the freeway, the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement, the far-off call of a crow, faded until there was only his name on that worn envelope. Who had put it there? How long had it waited? His knees felt unsteady. He took a step closer, hand half-reaching, then stopped. If he picked it up, if he opened it, something would change. There would be no going back to the safe, hard shell he had built. 6 months earlier, he would have told himself he didn't believe in moments like this. 6 months earlier, he had believed in numbers, contracts, and the comfort of schedules. 6 months earlier, Mia had still been alive. 6 months earlier, the morning started with email. Ethan's phone lit up before the sun did, screen filling with charts and sales reports. From his hillside glass and stone house, he could see the city waking up below, a grid of lights blinking toward morning. He barely looked. His eyes were on the projections for the new flagship restaurant his team wanted to build on a shabby block south of downtown. He padded across the cool hardwood floor, blonde hair still damp from a quick shower, and scanned the latest message from his CFO. Permits in motion. Community center holdouts still refusing to sell. Negative press flaring up online. He frowned, jaw tightening. "They'll come around," he muttered. Behind him, the house began to stir. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, along with the clink of dishes and the low murmur of his sister's voice. "Brooke, sweetheart, you have to eat something before school." "I'm not hungry." Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket and followed the sound. The kitchen, all white marble and stainless steel, looked like a magazine spread except for the cereal boxes and the backpack slumped on a chair. Brooke sat at the island, small shoulders hunched, blonde hair falling like a curtain around her face as she pushed cereal around with a spoon. At 10, she looked both far too young and suddenly older than she had any right to be. Lauren stood at the stove, ponytail threaded through the back of a faded baseball cap, blonde like her brother but softer, less polished. She glanced up when Ethan walked in. "You're actually home for breakfast," she said. "Mark the calendar." He tried for a smile. "I have a late meeting. Thought I'd risk a pancake." "Miracles," Lauren said, but her eyes went past him to his phone, as if she could see the unread messages waiting there. "Morning, Brooke," he said, taking a seat beside his daughter. "Big day." She shrugged without looking at him. "Just school." The silence that followed was thin and tight. Before, it would have been filled with Mia talking. Mia had always filled space. Stories about friends, complaints about teachers, ideas for decorating the restaurant booths with local kids' art. Mia's chair at the island was empty now, pushed in all the way, as if no one dared pull it out. Ethan's chest ached, but he pushed the feeling down and reached for the coffee Lauren set in front of him. His phone buzzed again. This time, Lauren's voice cut in before he could check it. "That's been ringing all morning," she said. "And for once, it's not your CFO." He frowned and picked it up. The screen showed an unfamiliar landline number and a voicemail notification. A second later, the phone buzzed again. Same number, now calling. He answered. "Ethan Hale." "Mr. Hale, this is Ms. Ramirez, the assistant principal at Ridgeview High. Do you have a moment?" The spoon stopped moving in Brooke's bowl. Lauren turned, the spatula in her hand forgotten. "Yes," Ethan said slowly. "Is there a problem?" "I'm afraid so," Ms. Ramirez said. "It's about Mia." The name landed like a stone in the room. For half a heartbeat, Ethan's brain refused to accept it. "Mia," he repeated. "There must be some mistake. Mia graduated months ago." A pause crackled on the line. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. I meant Brooke. I must have misspoken." Brooke's head jerked up. Her eyes, same clear blue as his, flashed with guilty surprise. Ms. Ramirez continued, "We've noticed Brooke has been absent several afternoons. Teachers report she signs in, but doesn't always show up to later classes. A few students mention seeing her near the Jefferson Community Center instead. We'd like to meet with you to discuss what's going on." Ethan's jaw tightened. The Jefferson Community Center. The exact building sitting in the middle of his new development plan, like a stubborn nail. "I see," he said. "I'll come in." After he hung up, the kitchen felt smaller. "Brooke," Lauren said gently. "Is that true?" Brooke swallowed, eyes darting between them. I like it there. They have art classes and you're supposed to be at school." Ethan cut in, sharper than he intended. "Not wandering around some crumbling building in a sketchy neighborhood." "It's not sketchy," Brooke whispered. Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter. Mia liked it there too. The name hung between them again. Lauren flinched. Ethan stood, the chair scraping the floor. "I'll handle the school," he said, "and the community center." Lauren's gaze hardened. "Maybe instead of handling everything, you could ask why she goes there." He bristled. "Because a 10-year-old doesn't know what's safe." "Because she's lonely," Lauren said quietly. "Because this house is big and quiet and full of ghosts. Maybe you should go down there and see what she's trying to hold on to." He looked at his sister, then at his daughter, whose lower lip trembled as she stared at her cereal. For a moment, something in him wavered. He thought of the block downtown, of investors waiting, of headlines, of the convenient story he told himself, that all of this was for his girls. "I'll go to the school this afternoon," he said finally. "We'll sort this out." It wasn't the answer Brooke needed, and everyone at the island knew it, but it was the only one he knew how to give. Outside, the city brightened under a weak sun. Somewhere, on a quiet hillside overlooking that city, a smooth stone waited, still unmarked by the small, chipped bird and the envelope that would change everything. Ridgeview High looked smaller than Ethan remembered high school being. Maybe that was memory playing tricks, or maybe everything did shrink when you walked in carrying the weight he did, with a principal waiting behind a closed door and your daughter's name on a file. He crossed the courtyard, past clusters of teenagers in hoodies and jeans. Some of them glanced up, recognition flickering. His face had been in the local news more than once. Family dining king, self-made billionaire. He saw a few phones lift, not quite pointing at him, and pretended not to notice. Inside, the main office smelled faintly of floor cleaner and paper. A woman with kind eyes and a name badge that read Ms. Ramirez stepped out from behind the counter when she saw him. "Mr. Hale? Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course," Ethan said, smoothing his tie even though he'd told himself he wasn't going to wear one. Habit 1. What's this about, exactly? Her expression softened in a way that made him uneasy. "Why don't we talk in my office?" He followed her down a short hallway lined with college posters and a bulletin board about grief counseling. His gaze snagged there for half a second, on the word loss, before he tore it away. In the office, another woman was waiting, thin, with paint smudges on her fingers and a worn cardigan falling off one shoulder. "This is Ms. Chong," Ms. Ramirez said. "She's Brooke's art teacher." Ethan shook her hand, then sat in the offered chair. For the first time in a long while, he felt like a student called in to answer for something he didn't remember doing. "We asked you here because we're concerned about Brooke," Ms. Ramirez began. "She's a bright student. When she's in class, she participates, she's polite. But she's been leaving campus several afternoons a week. Technically, she signs in, but she doesn't show up to her last 2 periods." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you believe she's going to the Jefferson Community Center?" Ms. Ramirez glanced at Ms. Chong, who nodded. "I volunteer there sometimes," the art teacher said. "I've seen Brooke in the after-school program. She signs up for open studio. She doesn't cause trouble. She just shows up, draws, helps the younger kids with their projects." "We're not calling to punish her," Ms. Ramirez added quickly. "We're calling because this pattern and some of the work she's been doing suggests she's carrying a lot more than she can hold." Ms. Chong reached for a folder on the desk and slid out a few sheets of paper. Ethan recognized his daughter's looping handwriting on the corner of one page. "Brooke Hale, Visual Arts." He leaned forward despite himself. The first drawing was of a house on a hill. It wasn't their exact home, but it was unmistakable. The glass walls, the broad deck, the glowing rectangles of light. In the foreground, a small figure sat cross-legged, tiny compared to the building, surrounded by little birds drawn in quick, delicate lines. Behind the glass, there were shapes, outlines of adults, tall and blurred, their faces not quite finished. One of them held a phone. Another's head was turned away. "She's very talented," Miss Chong said gently. "She has a clear sense of composition, a strong eye for mood." Ethan heard the compliment, but felt it land like a criticism. "What's this supposed to mean?" he asked, tapping the corner of the drawing. "It's just a house." Ms. Chong met his eyes without flinching. "She calls this one loud silence." She wrote that title on the back. Ms. Ramirez took over, flipping to another sheet. This one was darker, the pencil lines pressed harder into the paper. A girl stood at the edge of a crowd in what looked like a restaurant. Checkered floor, booths, hanging lights. Everyone else was drawn as vague faces, mouths open in laughter, hands gesturing. The girl's face was detailed, eyes huge and hollow. At the far end of the drawing, a man in a suit stood on a little platform, his smile wide, arms spread as if welcoming them all. That's one of my grand openings, Ethan thought, before he could stop himself. The balloons, the microphone, the banner in the background. He recognized the scene even though the banner had no letters on it. She told me this was about being in a place that belongs to someone you love, Miss Chong said, and still feeling like you're standing outside the glass. His throat felt dry. What does this have to do with truancy? Ms. Ramirez folded her hands. Mr. Hale, grief shows up in behavior and in art. We know your family has been through a terrible loss. We also know Brooke's sister spent a lot of time at the Jefferson Community Center before. She chose her next word carefully. Before the accident. Ethan's heart stuttered. Mia? Yes, Miss Chong said. She was helping with the mural project there last spring. She talked about wanting to get the kids' art into your restaurants one day, so people would see their work and feel less invisible. He stared at her, the words sinking in like stones through water. He had been aware, vaguely, of Mia's volunteer thing, another bullet point on her college applications. He had not known it had a specific wall, specific kids, a specific dream. We think Jefferson has become emotionally important to Brooke, Ms. Ramirez said quietly. It's a place connected to her sister and to her own expression. We're not saying she should keep skipping class, but if we just drag her back without acknowledging what that place means to her, we worry things will get worse. So, what exactly are you suggesting? He asked. That I tell my 10-year-old it's fine to cut school as long as she's drawing? No, Ms. Ramirez replied. We're suggesting you talk to her. Ask why she goes there. Maybe come with her sometime. Work with us and with the center instead of against it. He bristled at the word against. In his world, things were either obstacles or assets. The Jefferson Community Center had been an obstacle for months, a stubborn owner, a complicated zoning situation, a string of community petitions clogging his inbox. I appreciate your concern, he said, choosing a cooler tone. But I'm not comfortable with my daughter spending time in a building that's going to be demolished in a few months. It's not safe. The neighborhood isn't safe. I can pay for private art classes, therapy, whatever she needs. Ms. Chang's fingers tightened around the folder. With respect, Mr. Hale, she doesn't just need materials. She needs to feel like the places she loves aren't disposable. For a fleeting second, Ethan saw Brooke's face at the kitchen island that morning, the way her eyes had lit up when she'd mentioned the center. He saw Mia, paint-smeared and laughing, waving a flyer he'd barely looked at. He shut the image down. I will talk to her, he said, standing. And I'll make sure she attends her classes. You have my word. Ms. Ramirez rose with him. That's a start, she said softly. We're on your side, Mr. Hale. We just want Brooke to feel seen, not managed. He nodded, but the words slid off his defenses. Seen, not managed. In his world, being managed kept people fed and housed. Being seen didn't pay the bills. As he left the office, his gaze flicked once more to the grief counseling flyer on the bulletin board. A line at the bottom read, "You don't have to do this alone." He walked out into the bright afternoon and told himself he did. The house on the hill glowed amber with late sunlight when he pulled into the driveway. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Lauren was at the kitchen counter, her hands busy with chopping vegetables that didn't need chopping. The TV murmured in the background with the sound off. Brooke's backpack lay abandoned on the couch. How did it go? Lauren asked, without looking up. Ethan set his keys down too hard. Teacher's overreacting, as usual. She's been leaving class to go to Jefferson. It stops now. Lauren's knife paused mid-slice. Did they tell you why she goes? Yes, he said. Art classes. Nostalgia. Whatever. I'll enroll her in something better. Better, Lauren repeated slowly. She turned to face him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. The place Mia loved. The place where Brooke still feels close to her. You're going to rip that away and call it better. It's a rundown building with bad wiring and a neighborhood investors won't step foot in, Ethan snapped. I'm planning a facility that will employ hundreds of people. One community center can't outweigh that. You mean the one you're bulldozing to put your name on another sign? Lauren shot back. The words hit harder than he let show. He straightened his shoulders. It's not about my name. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe that for a second. You know Mia used to come home from that center talking about you? Lauren said. About how she wanted you to see what it meant to those kids. She wasn't just filling a volunteer requirement. She believed in it. He swallowed, something bitter rising in his chest. Mia believed in a lot of things she didn't understand yet. Or maybe she understood more than you did, Lauren whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy and familiar. In the hallway by the stairs, a small shadow shifted, unseen by both. Brooke sat with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, holding Mia's old hoodie in her lap. She had come down for a snack, heard her name, and stopped. Now she listened, heart pounding in her ears. Jefferson's going down, Ethan said finally, voice flat with the certainty he used in boardrooms. Permits are in motion. I'm not changing course because my daughter wants to play with paint in a broken building. Brooke flinched as if struck. You're not listening, Lauren said, her voice low but fierce. She's not just playing. She's hanging on to something she lost. I lost her too, Ethan snapped. I know, Lauren replied, eyes shining. That's why I keep hoping you'll stop acting like you didn't. Their gazes locked, both of them breathing hard, neither willing to be the first to soften. Years of shared history, childhood bedrooms, college loans. The day Ethan brought newborn Mia home, pressed against this moment, demanding it count for something. I'll talk to Brooke, he said at last, not quite looking at his sister. She'll understand. Lauren closed her eyes for a second. No, she murmured. She'll adapt. That's different. He didn't answer. He grabbed his folder, already reaching for the familiar comfort of contracts and timelines, and headed for his office. On the stairs, Brooke slipped silently away before he could see her. In her room, she shut the door gently, sat at her desk, and opened her sketchbook. On a fresh page, she drew the Jefferson Community Center, chipped bricks, crooked sign, wide front steps where kids sat laughing. Above it, she drew a wrecking ball, heavy and round, hovering in the sky like a second, darker sun. Then, in the corner, she added a small blonde figure standing in front of the building with arms spread, as if trying to hold it in place. She didn't know how to stop a billionaire from tearing something down. But as she pressed the pencil harder into the page, she made herself a quiet promise. If they were going to destroy the last place that still felt like Mia, they would not do it without seeing her there first. By the time the Jefferson Community Center showed up on the evening news, the word Jefferson felt like a splinter under Ethan's skin. Reporters showed footage of faded red brick, kids playing basketball in a cracked parking lot, volunteers painting over graffiti. A headline crawled along the bottom of the screen. Local center fights for survival against billionaire development plan. Lauren watched from the couch, arms folded. Brooke sat next to her, knees pulled up, Mia's old hoodie swallowed around her shoulders. Ethan stood behind them, tie loosened, eyes on the scrolling financial updates at the bottom of the screen rather than the story in the center. They make it sound like you're the villain in a superhero movie, Lauren said quietly. I'm not a villain, Ethan replied. I'm a businessman. That block is a mess. You know that. What I know, Lauren said, is that the mess is where a lot of people's actual lives are. Brooke's fingers tightened around the cuff of the hoodie. Mia said the community center was the only place that didn't feel sad after Mom, she murmured. The word Mom dropped between them like a stone. Even now, years after the freeway accident that had taken Claire, they still called it simply the accident. Back then, when Ms. Ramirez and Ms. Chong spoke about before the accident, they had meant that one. The night headlights blurred in rain, and a phone call changed everything. None of them yet understood there would be another night that would stretch that word into something larger and more unbearable. We're not talking about your mother, Ethan said, too quickly. Grief, for him, was like standing on the edge of a roof. One wrong step, and he wasn't sure he'd stop falling. We're talking about a building that's falling apart. Brooke looked back at the screen. The camera cut to a group of teenagers holding handmade signs. For a split second, the lens caught a close-up of one girl with blonde hair caught up in a messy bun, paint smudged on her cheek, her eyes fierce and bright. Mia. She held a sign that said this place saved US, the letters uneven and bold. When the reporter thrust a microphone toward her, the volume in the living room was low, but Brooke didn't need sound. She'd been there when Mia practiced her speech in the mirror, over and over, asking if it sounded fake or too needy. Ethan's breath hitched when he saw his older daughter on the screen. He hadn't known they were filming that day. He hadn't known she'd be there at all. He leaned forward and turned the volume up just as the segment cut away to an expert in a suit talking about economic revitalization. Great, he muttered. They cut before anyone mentions the jobs.
Funny, Lauren said.
I could have sworn I just saw one of your kids talking about something that saved her and all you noticed was the B-roll. He ignored that, but the image of Mia's determined face stayed with him long after the TV was off. A week later, he decided to fix everything with a dinner. Not just any dinner, of course. The flagship location of Hale Family Kitchen in Westwood, the first restaurant he'd opened, polished to a shine. White tablecloths, candles, the smell of roasting chicken and garlic. He booked a private room and told himself this would be about bringing everyone together. Family, investors, key staff. A show of unity. When they arrived, Brooke's eyes flicked nervously around the crowded dining room. Mia walked with a practiced swagger that didn't quite hide the tension in her shoulders. 16 now, she was all sharp angles and wild ideas. Blonde ponytail threaded through the back of a baseball cap, ripped jeans, and a t-shirt from the community center fundraiser. Lauren trailed them, her expression wary. Wow, Mia said, looking up at the chalkboard menu. Did you guys raise the prices again? Or are my eyes just bad? It's a special event menu, Ethan said. And watch the tone, please. I'm just saying, the kids from Jefferson couldn't eat here if they wanted to, she replied. You know, in the place their favorite billionaire built. He felt the sting of the word billionaire in her mouth. It sounded like a costume she didn't want him to wear. Mia, Lauren warned softly. Not tonight. Why not tonight? Mia asked, but she followed them into the private room anyway. Inside, a long table gleamed under soft light. A few of Ethan's partners were already there, men in tailored jackets, women in crisp dresses. They greeted him with firm handshakes and practiced smiles, calling him Ethan and Hale, talking about site plans and timelines. For a few minutes, The girls might as well have been invisible. Brooke slid into a chair near the end of the table, fingers hovering over the folded napkin like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to touch it. Mia stood behind her chair, eyes scanning the room, jaw tightening. Ethan noticed the shift in her posture but told himself he'd get to it later. First, he needed to reassure the people whose names appeared on his spreadsheets. Dinner flowed in courses: roasted vegetables, perfectly seared steak, chocolate lava cake. The investors laughed at Ethan's stories about his early struggles, flipping burgers, negotiating leases with landlords who never took him seriously until the money rolled in. He skipped the parts about the nights he'd come home too late to say goodnight, about Claire falling asleep on the couch waiting for him, about the day he'd signed the paperwork for the first restaurant instead of going to Mia's kindergarten recital. These new plans downtown are going to be transformative, one of his partners said, clinking a glass. We're cleaning up a blighted block and putting something beautiful and profitable in its place. Win-win. Mia's fork froze midair. What about the center? She asked. Conversation stuttered and then stumbled to a stop. Several heads turned toward her as if they'd forgotten she was there. Ethan set his wineglass down. Mia, this isn't the time. When is the time, Dad? She said, eyes flashing. When the bulldozers are already there. When the kids show up and find a fence where their basketball court used to be. One of the investors cleared his throat. The community center has had years to bring itself up to code. They haven't. It's underfunded, Mia snapped. Because nobody with money thinks it matters. Mia, Ethan said, his voice dropping into the tone he used in difficult meetings. Enough. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. You keep saying this is about helping people. I'm looking at the people you're actually helping, and they're all wearing suits. He felt heat rise in his face. He could feel his partners watching, waiting to see how he handled this. His own daughter turning a family dinner into a protest. Apologize, he said. Her chin lifted. For what? For disrespecting me in front of my colleagues, he replied. For acting like a spoiled child who thinks feelings matter more than reality. Something flickered in her eyes, hurt, quickly covered by anger. Reality, she repeated. Reality is kids going there after school, so they don't have to go home to empty houses or worse. Reality is Brooke skipping class just to feel like she's in the same room where Mom used to watch us paint. You think this is about feelings? It's about the only place that doesn't make us feel like guests in our own lives. Brooke's eyes went wide at the mention of her, but Mia didn't look down the table. She was staring at Ethan, daring him to see her. He reached for the one weapon he always had: control. I am building something that will give hundreds of people jobs, he said, each word clipped. I am not going to throw that away because my teenager thinks a moldy gym has sentimental value. The room seemed to shrink around the sentence. The investors shifted, uncomfortable. Lauren inhaled sharply. Ethan, she began. He held up a hand, not taking his eyes off Mia. There was a buzzing in his ears now, a mixture of humiliation, fear, and an old, familiar panic he refused to name. He heard his own father's voice in his head. Stop complaining. I'm putting food on the table, aren't I? And before he could stop himself, he said the thing he would regret more than almost anything he'd ever said. You'll grow up, he told Mia. You'll move on. People do. Places are just buildings. You of all people should know that by now. He meant the house they'd moved out of after Claire died. He meant the car they'd sold. He meant the way you tore up roots just to prove you could. But what he actually did was take every unspoken fear in his daughter's chest and give it words. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Mia's face went pale, then flushed. Her eyes shone, but she blinked fast, refusing to let tears fall in front of these strangers. "Wow," she said softly. "Good to know how replaceable home is. Guess that explains a lot." She pushed her chair all the way back and stood. Brooke reached for her sleeve. "Mia, don't," Brooke whispered. "Please." Mia squeezed her hand, just once. "It's okay, Bea. I need air." "Sit down," Ethan said. "We're not finished talking." She looked at him, really looked, as if taking a final photograph. "You're not talking," she said. "You're bulldozing." Then she turned and walked out. For a moment, Ethan considered going after her. Something in his chest screamed at him to stand up, to follow, to say anything other than what he'd just said. But then he felt the weight of eyes on him, the investor's uncomfortable sympathy, Lauren's anger, Brooke's trembling shoulders. "She'll cool off," he muttered, to himself as much as to anyone else. "She always does." Lauren stared at him as if she didn't recognize the man at the head of the table. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "Tonight feels different." Brooke slid down in her chair, arms wrapped around her stomach, trying to make herself small. No one noticed the way her lips moved, forming a silent plea. "Please go after her. Please, please, please." No one moved. Later, after the dinner limped to a close and the investors retreated politely, murmuring about family drama and teenagers, Ethan drove home alone. The city lights blurred at the edges as he gripped the steering wheel, replaying every word. He told himself he was giving Mia space, that storming off was part of being 16, that she'd be in her room when he got home, headphones on. Anger cooled into sulking. The house on the hill was dark when he pulled into the driveway, except for one light in the kitchen. Lauren sat at the table, fingers wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. Brooke was nowhere in sight. "Where is she?" Ethan asked, shrugging off his jacket. Lauren looked up. Her face was gray, streaked with dried tears. "Brooke's in bed." She cried herself to sleep. Her voice wobbled on the word cried. "I meant Mia," he said. Lauren's eyes closed for a moment, as if the question hurt. "She texted me an hour ago," she said. "Said she was going to Jefferson. That they were finishing something tonight. She told me not to worry." A knot formed in his gut. Finishing what? Lauren hesitated, then pushed back her chair and went to the counter. She picked up a shoebox he hadn't noticed before and set it in front of him. Inside, neatly stacked, were sketches and notes in Mia's handwriting. "It was supposed to be a surprise," she said. "That's why I didn't tell you before. She's been working on a mural with the kids at the center. A wall about second chances. She wanted to unveil it at the community meeting next month and invite you, to show you what this place could be with your support instead of your wrecking ball." Ethan stared down at the papers. Color studies, rough outlines of faces and hands, scraps of phrases. "Everyone deserves a table. Home is where someone waits for you. Built by kids, backed by hail." At the bottom of one page, in bold, hopeful letters, Mia had written, "Hale House Wall. This place saved US." Underneath, in smaller script, "If he sees this, maybe he'll see us too." The room swayed for a second. He reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the sketch. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I know," Lauren said. "That's the problem." Before he could ask anything else, the phone on the wall rang. The sound sliced through the quiet kitchen. Ethan and Lauren looked at each other, unease sharpening into something colder. Lauren grabbed the receiver. "Hello." He watched her face as she listened. Color drained out of her cheeks. Her free hand clutched the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. "Yes," she said, voice barely audible. "This is her aunt. Her father's here. We'll be right there." She hung up slowly, as if her arm weighed 100 pounds. "What is it?" Ethan demanded. "Lauren." She looked at him, eyes wide and unfocused, like someone staring at a cliff edge. "There's been an accident," she said, the words thick and unreal. "Near Jefferson. The paramedics, they think it's Mia." For a heartbeat, the world went silent. The phone on the wall, the refrigerator's hum, the distant city, everything fell away. All Ethan could hear was the echo of his own voice from earlier that night, cold and sure. "Places are just buildings.
You of all people should know that by now.
He felt the floor tilt beneath him. The neatly ordered lines of his life, his plans, his numbers, his timelines, all came loose at once. Somewhere in the city, sirens wailed. Ethan Hale, who had built an empire on never hesitating, stood frozen in his own kitchen, with a box of his daughter's dreams between his hands and the word accident tearing itself into a new, unthinkable meaning. The hospital corridors blurred together in Ethan's memory, white walls, antiseptic air, the low, urgent murmur of voices that never said the thing he needed to hear. Later, when he tried to recall the exact words the doctor used, all he could bring back was the way Lauren's knees buckled and the sound of Brooke's sob when someone finally told her. After that night, time fractured. For weeks, the house on the hill became a place people entered with casseroles and left with red eyes. Neighbors, employees, distant cousins, faces Ethan barely registered. He shook hands, accepted condolences, stood like a statue, while strangers said how sorry they were for his loss, as if he had misplaced something and might one day find it again. Then, slowly, the stream dried up. The casseroles stopped. The flowers wilted in their vases. The world, rudely, kept going. Ethan went back to work. He did it first because there were decisions to be made: insurance forms, restaurant leases, a scholarship fund the PR team suggested in Mia's name. Later, he went because the office was one of the few places where people didn't look at him like he might shatter if they spoke too loudly. He arrived earlier than everyone else and left after the cleaning crew. He approved 3 new locations in 2 months. He signed off on a national ad campaign. He stared at the Jefferson file on his desk, then slid it under a stack of other folders and told himself he'd get to it after the next quarter. On paper, he was soaring. At home, every footstep echoed. Lauren stayed because someone had to. She made sure Brooke got to school, cooked dinners that sat untouched, and quietly moved the boxes with Mia's clothes out of sight until Brooke was ready. She did the laundry, answered calls from relatives, and tried over and over to get Ethan to talk about something other than square footage and staffing. Most nights, he sat in his office with the door half closed, light from the computer screen turning his face ghostly. From the hallway, Lauren could see him there, typing as if life depended on it. Sometimes she'd stand outside the door, hand raised, ready to knock. Sometimes she knocked and walked in anyway. "Hey," she'd say. "Brooke had a nightmare. She called for you." "I've got a call with New York in 10 minutes," he'd answer without looking up. "Can you handle it?" Other times, she'd start with something small. "Remember how Mia used to steal the lime wedges off everyone's plates?" she might say, leaning against the doorframe. They hated sour stuff, but she loved it. She'd eat them like candy. He'd nod, a flicker of pain crossing his features.
Yeah.
She was weird like that. Then he'd go back to his screen. The house learned a new kind of silence, not the peaceful quiet of late nights, but a swollen, aching hush, full of things no one had the courage to say. Brooke moved through that silence like a ghost. At school, she did what was expected. She showed up to class, completed her assignments, nodded when teachers offered soft, worried looks. Ms. Chong encouraged her to keep drawing. Sometimes Brooke did. Most days, she stared at the blank paper until the lines in her head tangled too much to untangle. At home, she wandered. The living room, with its high ceilings and expensive artwork, felt like a museum of a family she barely recognized. The kitchen still smelled, faintly, of Mia's favorite pancakes. Her older sister's room stayed exactly as it had been the week before the accident. Posters on the wall, sketchbooks on the desk, a hoodie slung over the back of a chair. Lauren tried to keep the door closed, but Brooke learned how to slip inside, sit on the floor, and press her cheek against the side of the bed like a small animal seeking warmth. It was on one of those afternoons, when the sun slanted weakly through the blinds, that Brooke heard soft footsteps in the hallway and the creak of the linen closet door. Curious, she stood quietly and peered out. Lauren was in the hallway with a cardboard box on the floor beside her. The box was labeled in Mia's handwriting, Jefferson stuff. On top lay the sketches Ethan had seen weeks earlier, the ones for the mural that never got finished. Beneath them, Brooke caught a glimpse of something else, an envelope with her father's name on it. The letters were familiar. The same looping, slightly slanted handwriting that had once labeled school notebooks and birthday cards. Aunt Lauren,
Brooke said.
Lauren startled, then relaxed when she saw who it was. Hey, honey, I didn't know you were in there. Her voice sounded rough, like she hadn't talked all day. Brooke pointed at the box. What's that? Just some of Mia's things from the center, Lauren replied. She hesitated, then added, stuff she left in my car, stuff they gave me after. Her gaze dropped to the envelope. For a moment, she pressed her lips together, thinking. Then she slid the envelope deeper into the box and closed the flaps. Is that for Dad? Brooke asked quietly. Lauren's eyes flicked up. For a second, Brooke saw the answer there. Yes, a resounding yes, but what came out was different. It was, Lauren said. She wrote him something. I found it after. I don't think he's ready. Brooke frowned. But he should read it, right? If she wrote it. I know, Lauren whispered. She ran a hand over the top of the box, as if it were something fragile and alive. I know. Every time I try, he's somewhere else. With his lawyers or his spreadsheets or that scholarship fund he set up. So he doesn't have to think about the fact that one of the names on the brochure is his own kid's. She laughed once, a brittle sound. So I keep waiting for the right moment. Brooke chewed her lip. What if there isn't one? The question hung between them like a thin thread. Lauren swallowed. Then I'll have to make one, she said. I promise, okay? I'm not going to let it disappear. Brooke nodded slowly, but something bitter and scared lodged in her chest. Promises in their house had started to feel flimsy, like tissue paper. That night, as she lay in bed clutching Mia's hoodie, Brooke whispered into the dark, Please make her keep it. Please don't let him miss it. She didn't know who she was talking to. God, Mia, the universe. The room stayed quiet. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, then faded. The Jefferson Project did not disappear either. It hovered at the edges of Ethan's days, appearing in emails and messages he sometimes opened and sometimes ignored. His lawyers wanted signatures. His PR team wanted a new angle. We can pitch it as a revitalized Jefferson, one suggested on a call. You know, Hale Family Center or something. We keep part of the building, turn the rest into something shiny. It'll look great in the annual report. Not now, Ethan said, pinching the bridge of his nose. Table it for the next quarter. It was easier to defer than to decide. He told himself he was being cautious, thoughtful. He didn't admit that every time he saw the word Jefferson, he saw a blurred news photo of a mangled sedan under streetlights, the headlines careful not to show the worst angles. Once, late at night, he opened the Jefferson file and found, tucked between contracts and zoning diagrams, a single loose sheet. It was one of Mia's sketches, slipped there by Lauren in a moment of quiet rebellion. On the page, a wall stretched across the width of the paper. Hands reached up from the bottom, small hands, big hands, dark and light, some holding brushes, some just open. On the wall itself were rough outlines of faces, tables, bowls of food, and in the corner, in bold letters, the phrase "This place saved US." He stared at it for a long time, something hot building behind his eyes. Then he folded the page carefully and placed it back in the folder, as if returning it to a cage. He did not throw it away. He also did not pin it to his office wall the way some part of him wanted to. Instead, he went back to his spreadsheets. In the evenings, the fights between him and Lauren shifted shape. They were no longer sharp, explosive arguments like the night of the dinner. They were quieter now, colder. "You can't keep living like this," she said one Tuesday, standing in his office doorway. "Brooke needs you awake, not just functional." "I'm awake," he answered, eyes on his laptop. "You know what I mean," she said. "She had a panic attack in the middle of the night last week. You slept through it because you were passed out at your desk." "I had 2 calls with investors in Asia," he snapped. "I'm doing what I have to do to keep this whole thing from collapsing." "Maybe let some of it collapse," she said, voice trembling. "The parts that are killing you." He shot her a look. "You think closing restaurants will bring her back?" "No," Lauren replied. "I think choosing to be her father might have kept part of her from walking out that night believing buildings mattered more than she did." The words landed like a slap. He flinched, then hardened. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't rewrite what happened just to make it my fault." "I don't have to rewrite anything," she whispered. "I was there." Brooke, sitting on the stairs with a book she wasn't reading, pulled her knees tighter to her chest. Upstairs, in the linen closet, a cardboard box sat in the dark, with an envelope inside that had been written in a 16-year-old's careful hand. It waited while days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, gathering the dust of all the conversations that didn't happen. Lauren told herself she was protecting Ethan by holding on to it, protecting Brooke, buying time. But as winter tilted toward spring and the air in Los Angeles warmed again, the weight of the unopened letter only grew heavier. Something would have to break, she knew. It was just a question of what and when. Spring crept back into the city almost without anyone noticing. One day the jacaranda trees along the hillside streets were bare. The next, purple blossoms trembled over the sidewalks like a cautious celebration. From the deck of the house on the hill, the view was spectacular. Ethan rarely stepped out to see it. He sat at the dining table instead, laptop open, a neat row of documents laid out beside his coffee cup. The Jefferson file lay among them, its tabs slightly frayed from being moved, opened, and closed without resolution. On the other side of the table, Brooke worked silently on her homework. Her blonde hair fell around her face in a curtain, hiding most of her expression. Every so often she would glance at the Jefferson folder, then quickly look away. Lauren moved around the kitchen, rinsing dishes, wiping counters that were already clean. The hum of the dishwasher filled the spaces where conversation might have gone. Ms. Chong says I can enter the district art show next month, Brooks said suddenly, voice small but clear. Ethan looked up from his spreadsheet. That's great, he said automatically. What are you going to draw? She hesitated. She wants me to paint something that means a lot to me. Maybe you could do the house, he suggested. We've got a nice view. Kids like city skylines, right? Brooks' mouth tightened. I was thinking about Jefferson. The word landed between them like a dropped plate. Lauren's shoulders tensed. Brooke, Ethan began, already weary.
We've talked about this.
You haven't gone down there in months. Because you made me stop, she said. That doesn't mean it stopped meaning anything. He opened his mouth to argue. About safety, about school, about demolition timelines. But Lauren's voice cut in, sharper than usual. Maybe let her paint it, she said. It's just paper. You can't bulldoze that. He shot her a warning look. Lauren. She set the dish towel down, fingers trembling. We can't keep pretending Mia didn't love that place. Or that Brooke doesn't. That you don't remember what it meant to them. I remember too much, he snapped before he could stop himself. The room went quiet. Brooke's pencil hovered over her worksheet. Lauren exhaled slowly. Then maybe it's time you stop acting like the only way to survive remembering is to bury everything that hurts you. You think I enjoy this? He demanded. You think I like waking up every day in a house that feels hollow? I'm doing what I know how to do. I'm keeping things running. At what cost? She asked softly.
To you.
To her. To all of us. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the floor. I am not having this conversation again. That's the problem, she said. We've never actually had it. We just circle it like it's some sinkhole we're afraid to fall into. Brooke's gaze flicked between them, eyes wide, body coiled tight. She knew the pattern by now. Voices rising, then one of them shutting down, retreating behind a closed door. The unresolved words hung in the air afterward like smoke. This time, something in Lauren's face changed. A kind of exhausted resolve settled over her. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. Ethan frowned. Doing what? Living here like a placeholder, she said. Carrying all the things you won't look at. Taking care of Brooke while you handle everything by not handling any of it. That's not fair, he said. I'm providing. I know, she cut in. You're always providing. Money, houses, scholarships, buildings. You're excellent at providing for people. You're terrible at actually being with them. The word stung because they were too close to something his father had once said, thrown like an accusation during an argument Ethan had sworn never to repeat with his own family. You think buying that kid a bike makes you a dad? He had hated that man for years. Now, hearing Lauren, he wasn't sure how far he'd really outrun him. So what? He said, voice turning cold. You're quitting? She flinched at the word, but didn't look away. I'm moving out, she said. Not because I don't love you. Not because I don't love Brooke. But because staying here like this is crushing me. And it's teaching her that the way to survive pain is to go numb. Brooke's pencil dropped from her fingers. You're leaving, she whispered. Lauren's face crumpled for a moment before she steadied herself. She moved around the table and knelt beside Brooke's chair. I'll still see you, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. I'll still pick you up from school sometimes. We'll still have movie nights. I'm not disappearing, honey. I need my own space to breathe. And maybe your dad needs to notice how quiet this house gets when there's no one filling it in for him. Brooke swallowed hard. But what about... Her voice cracked. What about Mia's stuff? And the letter? Ethan's head jerked up. What letter? The question seemed to suck the air out of the room. Lauren closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was no more room for stalling. Brooke looked between them, confused and scared, a witness they hadn't intended to have. I found a letter, Lauren said slowly, after the accident, in one of Mia's sketchbooks from Jefferson. It was addressed to you. Ethan stared at her. You've had a letter from her this whole time? I was going to give it to you, she said quickly. I tried. 12 times. But every time I walked into your office, you were buried under numbers. Or you were so brittle, I thought one more crack would snap you in half. You decided I couldn't handle a letter from my own daughter? His voice rose, sharp and raw. You thought you got to choose what I could know about her? I thought, Lauren said, voice shaking, that if I handed it to you while you were still pretending you could outrun this, you'd skim it like an email and file it away with the other documents. I thought she deserved better than to have her last words treated like another line item in your day. Silence slammed down. Brooke's eyes filled. Can I see it? Ethan asked, each word heavy. Lauren hesitated only a moment, then nodded. It's upstairs, she said. I'll get it. She disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps lighter than her mood. Ethan stood there, hands clenched at his sides, feeling as though the floor beneath him had become transparent. A letter. All this time a letter. Brooke stared at him, cheeks wet. You're not mad at Mia, right? She asked. For writing it? He blinked, startled. Mad at her?
No.
God, no. His voice broke. He hadn't allowed that to happen in front of Brooke in months. I'm mad that I didn't know. Mad that I wasn't there, somehow. She nodded slowly, as if cataloging this rare honesty. Lauren came back carrying a small, slightly creased envelope. Ethan recognized the loops of the handwriting before she even came close.
Dad. Not Ethan this time.
Just Dad. His chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. I read it once, Lauren admitted, stopping just out of reach. Because I didn't want to hand you something that would blow you apart without knowing what was inside. I shouldn't have, maybe, but I did. And it's not what you think. What do I think? He asked hoarsely. That it's a list of everything you did wrong, she said. It's not. It's softer than that. Braver than that. He reached for the envelope. For a second, her fingers didn't let go. You're sure you're ready? She asked. His temper flared, hot and defensive. Don't tell me what I'm ready for. She dropped her hand as if burned. Okay, she said. Then read it. He turned the envelope over. His fingers hovered at the seal, then froze. In his mind, he saw two versions of himself. In one, he tore it open and fell straight through whatever thin ice he'd been skating on for months. In the other, he set it aside for later, the way he always did, and kept moving. Fear, old and familiar, curled cold fingers around his throat. What if I can't come back from it? He whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Brooke's small voice answered him. What if you can't come back without it? He looked at her, at the way hope and terror mingled on her face, and felt something inside him tilt. He could not do this right now. Not in this room, with both of them watching. Not when he already felt like he was standing on a ledge with no railing. I'll read it, he said. I promise. Just not tonight. Lauren's face fell, but she nodded once. Then I'm taking it with me, she said quietly, because if you put it in one of those folders, it'll vanish. The words sliced him again. So you'll decide when I get to read it, too?
No, she said.
I'm going to put it somewhere you'll have to meet it honestly, or not at all. He didn't understand what she meant, not yet. Lauren left 2 days later. She packed her things in 2 careful stages. First her clothing and personal items, then the invisible burdens she'd been carrying. The ceramic bird from Mia's shelf went into her bag. So did the letter. Brooke helped fold sweaters, her movements stiff, eyes swollen from late-night crying. Ethan hovered at the doorway of the guest room that had been Lauren's, wanting to say something and finding his throat full of gravel. I'm not abandoning you, Lauren said for the 20th time, hugging Brooke tight. You call me whenever you want, day or night. I'll always answer. Brooke nodded into her shoulder. To Ethan, Lauren said only, there's going to be a day when you can't keep sidestepping the grief and the guilt anymore. I hope, when it comes, you're not alone in this house. He didn't have an answer that wasn't offensive or cruel, so he said nothing. She left with a small suitcase, a cardboard box of her own, and the weight of a decision that hurt almost as much as staying would have. That afternoon, instead of going straight to her new apartment, Lauren drove to the cemetery. The hillside was quiet, the city a soft smudge below. She walked to Mia's grave with a ceramic bird wrapped in a scarf and the envelope in her pocket. Hey, kiddo, she whispered when she reached the stone. I'm late. I know. I'm sorry. She knelt on the damp grass, fingers tracing the carved letters of Mia's name. For a long moment, she just breathed. I messed up, she said quietly. I should have given this to him sooner. I thought I was protecting him. Maybe I was protecting myself from watching him break. Either way, you deserved better. Her hands shook as she unwrapped the bird and set it gently on the narrow ledge at the base of the stone. It looked small and stubborn against the gray. Then she took out the envelope. The paper was soft at the edges from being handled, but the ink was still clear. Dad, I can't carry this for you anymore, she murmured. He has to meet you here. She slid the envelope under the ceramic bird, wedging it tight, so the wind wouldn't catch it. For a second, her fingers lingered on the paper, wanting to keep it, to hold onto this last thing of Mia's. Then she let go. When she stood, her knees ached. She brushed dirt from her jeans and looked down at the grave one last time. Send him here, she whispered. However you can. He needs to read it. Brooke needs him to read it. The breeze picked up, lifting a strand of her hair. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Life went on. Lauren walked back to her car with her hands empty and her heart unbearably full. 3 nights later, Brooke stood in the doorway of Ethan's office, twisting the hem of her t-shirt between her fingers. Dad, she said. He glanced up from his laptop. The house felt bigger now, echoing with Lauren's absence. Brooke's small figure in the frame of the door looked more fragile than ever. Yeah. Can you go see Mia? She asked. Like at the cemetery. Soon. His throat tightened. Why? Because Aunt Lauren did, she said. And she looked lighter afterward. Like something let go. And because I keep thinking about that letter. I feel like it's waiting. He swallowed hard. The idea of driving up that hill again made his chest seize, but he saw the plea in her eyes. I'll go, he said. I promise. When? She whispered. Soon, he answered. It was the best he could do. That night, after Brooke was asleep, he sat alone in the dim living room, the city lights glittering below like a field of distant fires. His phone buzzed with an email reminder. quarterly review, expansion opportunities, Jefferson project status. He stared at the screen until the words blurred, then set the phone down. On the coffee table in front of him sat one of Mia's old sketchbooks, left there by Brooke. He opened it without thinking and found, between thick pages of charcoal and watercolor, a scribbled note on a torn piece of paper. Nothing important, just a doodle, a quick sketch of a man in a suit with a restaurant menu for a head, arms flailing comically. Underneath, in Mia's handwriting, "Don't forget you're a person, not a brand."
M.
A laugh broke out of him, then turned almost immediately into a sob. He pressed the heel of his hand to his eyes, but it was too late. The wall he'd built had cracked. "I'm trying," he whispered into the empty room. "God, Mia, I'm trying." In the quiet that followed, another thought rose, persistent as a tide. There's something waiting for you on that hill. For once, he didn't push it away. 3 mornings later, he got in his car and drove toward the cemetery, leather folder by his side as if proof that he still knew how to be the man he'd always been. He didn't know yet that by the time he came back down that hill, he would never be exactly that man again. The cemetery looked different in the daylight than it had in his nightmares. Birds flicked through the trees. The grass was damp and bright, the sky a washed-out blue that reminded Ethan of old photographs. He parked lower on the hill this time and walked the rest of the way, as if the climb might steady him. The leather folder swung at his side out of habit. Halfway up, he realized he didn't need it, that there was nothing in those papers that could help him here, but he kept holding on anyway. Mia's grave came into view slowly, stone by stone, until hers was there, the familiar shape, the letters he knew by heart. The ceramic bird was the first thing he saw. It perched stubbornly on the narrow ledge at the base of the stone, wing chipped, white glaze dulled by sun and rain. For a moment, he could almost hear her voice again, teasing him in that thrift store aisle. "Too ugly to leave behind, Dad. It needs us." His throat tightened. Then he saw the envelope. It lay tucked under the bird, edges curled from the weather, but still intact. The ink on the front had bled a little, but he could read it now clearly.
Dad.
In his memory of that first numb visit, he remembered seeing his own first name there, Ethan, and feeling like the universe had written an accusation. Now, looking straight at it, he realized he had been wrong. It had said Dad all along. His grief-soaked brain had swapped the word for the one that felt safer. His hand shook as he reached down. The paper was cool and a little soft under his fingers. For a second, he just held it there, pinned between his thumb and the stone, as if he could still decide to walk away. What if I can't come back from this? His fear whispered. Then he heard Brooke's small voice in his memory. What if you can't come back without it? He slid the envelope free. His knees gave out before he made a conscious choice. One moment he was standing. The next, he was on the damp ground in front of his daughter's name, suit pants soaking through, breath coming in short, uneven pulls. He broke the seal. The paper inside was covered in Mia's handwriting, loops and scribbles, hearts in the margins where she'd gotten distracted. A pen had blotted once in the corner, a tiny black star. He started to read. "Hey, Dad. I know you hate long emails, so I'm writing an old-school letter you can't just flag and forget. If you're reading this, I either chickened out of giving it to you or something went wrong, and Aunt Lauren had to do it for me. Either way, this is the stuff I've been trying to say without saying it." The words blurred for a moment. He blinked hard and forced himself to go on. She didn't list his failures. She didn't catalog every missed recital or late-night argument. Instead, she wrote about small things, The time he'd stayed up helping her with a science project even though he had an early meeting. The goofy way he'd dance in the kitchen when he thought no one was watching. The way his hand shook when he signed the papers for the first restaurant, like he was scared and excited at the same time. "I know you, okay?" She'd written. "You act like you're made of steel, but you're not. You're scared you'll turn into your dad, so busy providing that everyone is scared to need you. That's why you keep building and buying and bulldozing. If you're always fixing something, you don't have to sit still long enough to feel anything." His breath hitched. No one else knew about that old fear. He had never said it out loud. "Jefferson isn't just a building to me," the letter went on. "It's where I saw what your money could be if it was about people instead of just projects. The kids there don't care about your net worth. They care about the fact that someone showed up with pizza and stayed to listen. I want you to come see the mural when it's done. It's for everyone, but it's also for you. I want you to see what you built without even knowing it. This weird, stubborn kid, me, who believes things can change. I'm mad at you sometimes, but I don't want to fight you. I want you on our side." Then, near the bottom, the line that finally broke him. "Please don't let fear and pride turn you into a ghost while you're still breathing. Not with me. Not with Brooke. Not with Aunt Lauren. We already lost Mom. We can't lose you too." The words swam. The letter slipped a little in his grip. A sound tore out of him, half sob, half something older and rawer than any word he knew. He folded over the paper, forehead bowing to the cold stone, and the dam he'd built so carefully for so long shattered. He cried like he hadn't even the night she died, ugly, shaking sobs that dragged up years of grief. For Claire, for Mia, for the boy he'd once been who thought money would keep everyone safe. He cried for every time he'd chosen a conference call over a conversation, a grand opening over a quiet dinner, a building over a person. He cried until his chest hurt and his hands ached from clenching the letter. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him at first. "Ethan?" Lauren's voice was soft, unsure, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to be here. He turned, wiping at his face with the back of his hand. She stood a few yards away, hair pulled back, eyes already shining. In one hand, she clutched her car keys. The other was empty. "I didn't know you were coming," she said. "I promised Brooke," he managed. His voice sounded scraped raw. "And I think Mia did too." Lauren's gaze dropped to the letter in his hand. "You read it," she whispered. He nodded. For the first time in months, he didn't try to hide anything. "You were right," he said. "It's not what I thought. It's worse. And better." She stepped closer, the grass wet beneath her shoes. "I should have given it to you sooner," she said. "I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was just terrified of watching you fall apart." "I needed to fall apart," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how without taking everyone down with me." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking at the stone, at the little ceramic bird guarding the small space where the envelope had been. "She wanted you to choose," Lauren said. "Not between her and your work, between being a brand and being a person." He swallowed. "I've been hiding behind the brand for a long time." Lauren's mouth curved in a sad, almost smile. "Yeah," she said. "But you're not the only one who's been hiding." I kept the letter. I moved out instead of forcing this conversation. We all did what we knew. He looked at her. "Is it too late to know something else?" The question hung there, fragile. She met his eyes, then nodded slowly.
"For Mia, yeah," she said.
"For us? For Brooke?"
"No."
"Not if you actually do something with what you just read." He looked back at the letter. The words blurred again, but this time from resolve as much as tears. I'm not tearing it down, he said. What? Lauren asked. Jefferson, he replied. I'm not demolishing it. No half-measure revitalized PR stunt either. We fix what's broken. We keep what's working. We bring in the art programs, expand the kitchen, turn it into a real community hub instead of a headline. He laughed once, shaky. No Hale Family Center in giant letters on the roof. Mia would haunt me for that. Lauren exhaled a breath that sounded like it had been stuck in her chest for months. You mean that? Yes, he said, feeling the decision settle into place like a bone clicking back into joint. I'm tired of building things that look like family from the outside and feel empty on the inside. If I'm going to put my name anywhere, it's going to be next to something she believed in. And Brooke? Lauren asked softly. What about her? He thought of his younger daughter standing in doorways listening, of her drawings of wrecking balls and small figures holding out their hands. I'm going to tell her I'm sorry I made her choose between what she loves and what I approve of, he said. I'm going to ask her to help me. With the art show. With Jefferson. With understanding what Mia saw that I didn't. You're going to have to say those words out loud, Lauren said. Not just think them. He nodded. I know. They stood there a little longer, the three of them, Ethan, Lauren, and the name on the stone, held together by grief and something that looked cautiously like hope. Before they left, Ethan laid his palm flat against the granite. I don't know if you can hear me, he said quietly. But I read it, kiddo. I hear you. I can't fix what I broke with you, but I can stop breaking everything else. The wind lifted the edge of the letter in his hand, then let it fall again. He tucked it carefully into his jacket pocket, close to his heart, and rose slowly to his feet. His knees ached as he straightened. For once, he didn't resent the pain. It felt like proof that he had knelt where he needed to. That evening, the house on the hill felt different from the moment Ethan stepped inside. Brooke sat at the kitchen island with her sketchbook open, a mug of cocoa cooling beside her. When she saw him, she stiffened, then noticed his red-rimmed eyes and the damp spots on his pants. You went, she whispered. He nodded. His voice felt rusty, but he used it anyway. I did. Did you? She couldn't finish the sentence. He pulled the letter gently from his pocket and laid it on the counter. She wrote more than I deserved, he said. And all of it was braver than I've been. Brooke's fingers hovered over the envelope, not quite touching it. Are you mad? She asked. At Aunt Lauren? At me? At her? No, he said immediately. I'm angry at myself. For not listening when she was still here to argue with me. For letting you carry so much of this alone. Her eyes filled. I didn't know how to make you see. You shouldn't have had to, he said. That was my job. I failed you, Brooke. I failed both of you. I can't change the night she left that restaurant. I will regret those words until the day I die. But I can change what I do tomorrow. And the day after. She sniffed. What are you going to do? He took a breath. I'm canceling the demolition at Jefferson, he said. We're going to repair it instead. Expand the programs. Work with the people already there instead of pushing them out. Her mouth fell open. You're serious? Completely, he said. I want you there with me when I talk to the director. If you want to be, I want you to enter your painting of Jefferson in that art show. And if you'll let me, I'd like to come see it. For the first time in months, hope flashed in her eyes without immediately being doused by doubt. Okay, she whispered. Then, after a beat, can we put Mia's mural designs on the wall, too? I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time, he said. Brooke nodded, a small, fierce light kindling in her expression. She picked up her pencil and, on a fresh page, began sketching a wall with hands reaching up, just like her sister's design. But this time, she added a new figure, a tall man with his sleeves rolled up, standing beside the kids, paint on his own hands. Ethan watched her draw, then went to his phone. With fingers that still trembled, he called his lawyers, his CFO, his PR team. One by one, he told them the same thing. The project was changing. The parameters were different. If they wanted to stay on, they'd be helping build something that didn't look like the usual headline. Some pushed back. Some didn't understand. For once, he didn't bend. Later, when the calls were done and the house had settled into a quieter kind of quiet, he sent one more message to Lauren. Went to see her. Read it. Changing Jefferson.
Can we talk?
Brooke, and I would like you here for dinner this weekend. No investors. Just us. Her reply came a minute later. I'll bring dessert. And tissues. He smiled, the expression unfamiliar and fragile but real. Outside, the city lights glowed. Somewhere downtown, a worn brick building stood stubbornly in the middle of a block of possibility. It was still old, still underfunded, still flawed. But it was going to remain standing. In his jacket pocket, close to his heart, Mia's letter rested against his ribs, paper thin, impossibly heavy, and, for the first time, not a weight holding him down but a tether pulling him toward the person she believed he could be. The man who, on a gray morning on a hillside, had finally let himself fall to his knees so he could learn how to stand up differently.